In 2022, a young Irish woman named Natasha O'Brien was beaten unconscious in the streets of Limerick by a male Irish soldier who later went on to brag about the attack on social media. In a Snapchat post at the time, Cathal Crotty joked to his friends that it took 2 to put her down and 2 to put her out. By this point, Natasha O'Brien had suffered a broken nose and a concussion, as well as severe swelling and bruising around her face from the beating she had received. Yet, despite publicly boasting about battering a woman into unconsciousness in the street and then pleading guilty to that offence, Cathal Crotty received a fully suspended sentence and walked out of the court a free man without having to serve a day in prison. Now, it goes without saying that this story is absolutely shocking, but sadly, the least shocking part about it is actually the suspended sentence. Because to those of us who follow the news regularly in Ireland, we see cases like this all the time involving all sorts of victims. For years now, on what feels like a weekly basis, we see instances where heinous or violent crimes are committed in this country and the perpetrator simply walks free. We see it when the victim is male, such as in January when a man was given no jail time for hospitalising another man with 16 stitches in his face and repeatedly kicking him in the ribs while he was down. We see it when the victim is female, such as in the case where a man gave his ex-partner 2 black eyes, damaged her teeth, and stood on her neck for around a minute while saying, "I'm going to effing kill you." That man received no jail time for that offence. We see it when the victim is white or when the victim is an ethnic minority, such as when 2 teenage boys, Padraig O'Sullivan and Tega Agberheri in Waterford, were attacked with acid, leaving both boys with first-degree burns and requiring skin grafts.
There was 4 of them. They were tooled with weapons and they attacked us. And when we were trying to get away, they threw acid on us.
Is that where you had the skin grafts, Pádraig?
Yeah, I had a skin graft, 2 on my thigh and 1 on my calf.
Okay. Now you were a hurler. You played for Waterford, isn't that right?
Yeah, I played for Waterford and Ballygunner.
Are you back playing?
No, I won't be back playing Ireland for about another 2 years at least.
One of the boys, Tega, almost went blind and his vision was only narrowly saved by the fact that he was wearing contact lenses at the time of the attack, which by the grace of God prevented the acid from splashing directly into his eyes.
So the acid was thrown in your face?
Yeah, it got in my face and my eyes.
Can you see well now? Because I know there were concerns at the time about your eyesight.
Like in my right eye, the vision's it's worse than it was before, but like I have a little scar kind of near the middle of my eye, but it's getting better. Like.
And yet no criminal charges were brought against the alleged perpetrators in that case, and they simply received juvenile cautions. We see light sentencing when the victim is a child, we see it when the victim is a pensioner, we see it when the victim is Irish-born, we see it when the victim is foreign-born. No matter who you are in Ireland, there is a reasonable chance that if you get attacked in this country, you could walk away feeling like you received no meaningful justice at all. And now, having been perfectly content to watch our justice system operating like this out in the open for years, politicians and journalists suddenly wonder why crime is on the rise. Well, actually, I take that back. Let me correct myself. They don't wonder anything. To say they wonder why crime is on the rise would be to imply that there is some actual thought involved, which is not really the style of our leadership class when it comes to these issues. I mean, why sit down and seriously think about what led to a problem and how to fix it when you can just leap to lazy, obviously incorrect conclusions that won't solve the issue, but which will deflect blame away from those responsible, i.e. politicians. What do I mean by this exactly? Well, as the country reacts to Natasha O'Brien's case, just take a look at all of these amazing headlines from the best and brightest that this country's commentariat has to offer. The shocking case of Natasha O'Brien shows that Ireland is still a cold country for women. Natasha O'Brien's story shows how women are trapped inside a system built on misogyny. Because of men, the absolute minimum that we have to do right now is apologise to Natasha O'Brien. Justice Minister Helen McEntee has eagerly leaned into this narrative, of course, saying that it's all society's fault.
And then is viciously assaulted and beaten in the way that she was. It is absolutely reprehensible. And I think it's devastating for all of us to know that that's where we still are in our society.
Now, I hate to break the magician's code and give the game away here, but you do see what's happening, of course. Helen McEntee is actively pushing the blame for this entire fiasco onto society, i.e. you, in order to deflect culpability away from herself and her government with the help of the media. I raised the issue of the Irish court's outrageously lenient sentencing with Helen McEntee all the way back in 2022, and I'm sure I wasn't the first person to do so.
How can you say that you're serious about tackling violent crime when the courts consistently hand out the lightest sentences possible for the most heinous crimes?
So the minister has been fully aware that sentencing was a problem for years now, and yet what was her response when I asked her about it at the time? Well, she said that the government would be introducing the new standalone offences of stalking and non-fatal strangulation.
We will introduce a new standalone offence of stalking, a new standalone offence of non-fatal strangulation.
And this would be a great move, if it wasn't for the fact that those are already crimes. Stalking someone is the same as harassment, which is a crime, and non-fatal strangulation, i.e. choking someone until they nearly die, is called attempted murder, which is already quite illegal, I think you'll find. So both of these are completely pointless and redundant. The minister also continues to talk about increasing the maximum sentence for various crimes as a solution to lenient sentencing, but the maximum sentence is irrelevant since the whole problem here that we're discussing is that judges aren't getting anywhere near the maximum sentence. It doesn't matter if, in theory, the maximum sentence for a crime is 1,000 years. If the judges are handing out fully suspended sentences and letting people off with slaps on the wrist, then the maximum sentence is immaterial. It's minimum sentences and harsher sentencing guidelines that we need to be looking at, obviously. And all the while, even if judges wanted to jail more people, they couldn't because the prisons are completely overcrowded and we haven't built a new one in years despite massive population growth. Previous governments wanted to build a new super prison in Thornton Hall, but that site is now being used for asylum accommodation despite the protests of many locals, because of course it is. So for years, we've had the most ineffectual, impotent justice minister imaginable, a politician who has failed abysmally to deal with the sentencing issues that have been repeatedly brought to her attention, while the media has stayed largely silent and complicit in the matter. And then, when it all goes horribly wrong and a woman gets brutally battered in the streets with little to no consequences, what do the politicians and the journalists do? Well, they point a finger at the general public and they blame you. Rather than accepting some damn personal responsibility, instead they say it's all men's fault. Apparently, if you're a male, you are to blame for random attacks on women because you have a scrotum which makes you guilty by association with some guy you've never even heard of or met. And if it's not men who are to blame, then it's the Defence Force's fault, even if all the other soldiers are perfectly decent and exemplary members of society. Or it's the fault of society at large, whatever that means. Next, we'll probably hear that climate change played a role. Anything and everything is to blame, apparently, except for the actual people who write the legislation and who are directly responsible for sentencing. They get off the hook scot-free, while everyone else takes the fall. Very convenient, isn't it? And the opposition are far from innocent here. We have politicians like Labour's Ivana Bacik tut-tutting and wagging her finger while calling for a review of suspended sentences when it comes to crimes. Meanwhile, just a few months ago, we see Labour's Aidan O'Riordan saying that building more prisons is misguided and that being sent to prison should be a last resort in the criminal justice system. In other words, we need to jail criminals less, was Labour's position just a few months ago. So first you advocate for lighter sentencing and less jail time for offenders, and then you react with scorn and outrage when you get exactly what you asked for. Pull the other one, lads. This is another clear example of the establishment just catching up to what the right has been saying for years, which is happening on more and more issues and which really exposes the level of naive short-sightedness that we have among this country's leadership classes. The fact of the matter is, Helen McEntee says that her primary goal is to stamp out violence against women, and she has flatly failed by her own standard. Women are being murdered and attacked in the streets by this government's own admission. The US State Department is reprimanding the government for failing to tackle human trafficking multiple years in a row. All of this is overseen by political parties which have been in power for over a decade, including the opposition, who went along with it every step of the way. And then at the end of all of that, they want to turn around and blame you because sexism. It's truly pathetic. When you have violent people in society who know that they're likely to get away with crime and who view the justice system as a joke, then it doesn't take a genius to figure out that vulnerable people are going to get hurt, and women tend to be less able to defend themselves than men because they're on average physically weaker. So tragically, you'll see women getting hurt at high rates in such a scenario. It's not because of sexism, it's because the people in power are asleep at the wheel and allowing unchecked violence to metastasize in our society for years. And just once, it would be nice if someone in charge was willing to show some accountability and admit that. Before you go, there is another video just like this one where I discuss the HSC urging staff not to imply that there are only two genders, because of course we know there's many more than that. But that video is only available for Gript Premium members. If you want to be able to watch that video, then sign up for Gript Premium today via the link on screen. And in addition to that, if you are signed up as a paid Gript supporter and you would like me to answer some questions, just email the question to news@gript.ie with the subject line, "Question for Ben," and I will respond to a bunch of your questions and comments at the end of next week's episode, but only for those who are signed up to Gript Premium. So if you're not signed up yet, get on it now and I could be answering your question next week. As always, thanks for watching.